All right. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the ideal sales structure for a productive sales conversation that gives you the best chance of converting that conversation into a sale. So, the opening phase, like the first thing that you say to the prospect, is really just about disarming them. Your goal is to lower sales resistance and disarm them as much as possible. And so, tactically, what I would suggest doing is using verbal pausing and tonality to sound very, very conversational, not like you're reading any sort of script. Sounding robotic will raise sales resistance, and sounding off the cuff and almost a bit lost will help the prospect relax. So just state that we're there to just help them find out if we can even help them, because sometimes there are people we just can't do much for. Causes prospects to lean in and relax a bit, and use neutral language whenever possible. So words like possibly, might, what you might be looking for, that type of thing. It just relaxes them. And the goal of the opening phase is to take the focus off the salesperson and put it onto the prospect. And you want to figure out their surface level overarching goal, or what they're hoping to get out of the call. So an example would be like, hi, I, it, if this is a phone call, you would introduce yourself, but if it's Zoom, you'd obviously go back and forth. Can you hear me? Blah, blah, blah. How are you doing? They'd be like, great, how are you? You could say like, oh, I'm just being boring, staying out of trouble, or just drinking too much coffee, something like that. And if you say you're, just being boring, they might be like, oh, I'm sure you're not boring, whatever. Just relaxes them. So then you can go into something like, it looks like you booked time on my calendar today to talk about possibly getting some help with XYZ, right? The reason you say that first sentence, you booked time on my calendar, it's a subtle authority frame, um, and it puts you in a position of that trusted authority from the beginning, and it's very subtle. um, and then you obviously want to figure out why they're on the call, and if you say right, they'll be like, oh, actually I was just looking for some more information, or actually no, I don't know why I'm on the call today. You want to know that early so you just get off and don't waste your time with tire kickers. But usually they'll be like, yeah, that is why I'm here, and then you can be like, great. So the first part of this call is just to like find out a bit about your background as far as what you've done in the past, kind of what you're doing now, and I would say what you're like potentially looking for in terms of possible training or coaching, just to see if we can actually help you, because sometimes there are certain people we just can't do much for. You know what I mean by that, right? They'll be like, oh yeah, of course. So I was curious, like, what is it about our company or what you saw in the video about us that prompted you to book a call, or that attracted your attention? The point here is just to get the focus off you and onto the prospect. So how they respond, not super important. It's going to be surface level stuff for them anyway, or buzzwords like, oh, I'm here for financial freedom, says everybody everywhere. So phase two is going to be just going into their current circumstance. It's the current circumstance phase. So you want to find out what they're currently doing about that problem that they're there to solve, and see if there are other decision makers possibly in play. So when they say, "Oh, I'm here to like, fix my marketing." Oh, okay. So what are you doing right now as far as your marketing efforts go with lead gen, all that? Okay. How long have you been doing that way? I'm curious what caused you to go that route. Um, or how have you been learning how to do that? And are you on your own, or do you have a partner that you're working with in the business? Just very surface level circumstantial stuff, what they're doing to fix their problem, to give you some context. And if there are other decision makers at play, you want to know about that early in the call in case you do need to get them on the phone or on the Zoom call to make any sort of decision. And then the next phase is going to be the identify problems phase three. And this is this is a question that I like to ask, just to find out what they like, but more importantly, what they don't like about what they're doing. Okay, so the way I tactically ask this is I want to figure out what they like first, because it causes them to give a more thoughtful response about what they don't like, rather than just a knee-jerk reaction. What I mean by knee-jerk reaction is like, if you just say, "Oh, well, what do you not like about your current thing?" They'll be like, yeah, it's just not making enough money." Just knee-jerk, right? You want them to really think about it. So yeah, so the way you would say this is, so I'm curious. So with the marketing company that you've had right now, do you like what they're doing? They'll be like, it's okay. Well, I mean, you picked them. You must be can't be that bad. Like, what are they doing well? And they'll be like, oh, well, they do this and this. Okay, well, I guess, is there anything that you would change about what they're doing if you could though? And when you ask it that way with a little bit of that tonality, they're going to give a more thoughtful response about what they don't like. And you really have four goals here that you want to probe on. Four things is you want to find out what's the problem, how long has that been a problem, what are the impacts personally, professionally of that problem, and what are the possible ramifications of not solving that problem, and or what would it do for them to solve this problem. So these are things you want to figure out early, like, okay, so you're not getting enough leads, or your lead costs are too high. How long has that been going on? Okay. And has that, the having leads that are super expensive, has that had an impact on the business? Well, in what way though? Okay. And so what would it do for the business to have leads that were a lot less expensive? Oh, we'd be able to scale, blah, 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 blah. So you want to just ask those four questions just to get clarity on what their problem is. And this is the entrenchment question. This is the next thing I like to do in this part of the sales structure. The entrenchment question is to get them to entrench themselves into the idea of getting help and to basically get them to antagonize what they've been doing. And so, and the way I would ask this is this, like, just so I can understand like the rationale, like besides obviously getting a cheaper lead, what's the main reason, you're looking at a possibly going with a different firm to fix your marketing rather than just, just helping your current firm figure all this stuff out? Because you want them to antagonize what they're doing. Or let's say they were doing all their marketing on their own and they never hired an agency. You could be like, well, help me understand it, like just so I can understand the rationale. Like besides like, wanting cheaper leads, like what's the main reason that you're looking into possibly getting a professional agency to manage your ads rather than just doing much more of what you've already done, which is like just more of your own research and hope it works out. They'll be like, oh, well, I can't figure it on my own. Okay, why do you feel that way? You want to drive them towards you, and that's the entrenchment question. You want to entrench them into the idea of getting help. So you can have a couple of these, but you want to know where you're steering them, and that's towards you. So that's a very effective question. Phase four would be the solution phase. Just talk about what they're aware of in terms of like finding a solution to see if they tried to solve this problem in the past, and to see if there are any needs that weren't met previously, or if they had any bad experiences. So so example questions could be like, before you found us, were you out there looking for other agencies or, means of solving this, or what were you doing about this previously? They'll be like, yeah, I mean, we were thinking about this code sure company, but we didn't go with them. Wait, why do you say that though? Why didn't you go with them? Oh, well, they were too expensive. Okay, so how do you mean they were too expensive? Oh, well, we couldn't afford them. Oh, okay. And so you want to probe and find out what is going on here. So you could be like, okay, so were they too expensive? Like you didn't feel like they would deliver the result, or you physically weren't able to, financially afford their services. Oh, we just weren't able to afford it. That's data you want early, but you want to figure out what's going on. If they had a bad experience with a coach, like, yeah, we did have a coach at one point or an agency, but they were terrible. Oh, what happened there? Oh, well, they just didn't do what they said. Okay, well, were other clients of theirs getting results? Yeah, they were. So what in your mind was the reason that you didn't get results with them? You want to find out what it is, and if you need to reframe them. Um, might be a good time to do it here. And if they've never invested in getting help or in themselves at all, if you're selling B2C, it might be necessary to do a reframe. You're like, oh no, I've never invested in mentorship or coaching or whatever, yet they're in a position where they're not making the kind of money they want to. This is where you could be like, well, can I make a suggestion to you? They'll be like, yeah, like, have you considered that, not, doing things that way, that just like completely on your own and not ever investing in yourself and getting help might actually be preventing you from, making the kind of money you want to in your business? Are you okay with me saying that? They'll be like, yeah. They're like, well, what do you think needs to change on your end, I guess, mindset wise, so that you can actually evolve past this place where you're in right now and get to a place where you are able to grow the business? Well, I need to like get help and invest myself, right? So sometimes you have to reframe them there. And there's so many different ways you could do that. So this is a place where I like to do it. Um, and we just went over that. So, if they've invested in themselves previously, they had a good experience, you don't need to really spend that much time in this phase, just move on. So, and this is also where you want to find out what they're looking for. So after you go through all that, be like, well, besides, like getting cheaper leads and getting some help to set that up, like what specifically are you looking for in terms of training or help? In other words, what would be your ideal criteria? And the goal here is I like to very subtly tie in our pillars with what they need. Because if they're saying they need something you don't offer, it's not going to be a productive conversation. Um, and sometimes they don't know what they don't know. So you might have to suggest things that they may need. But you might be like, okay, well, do you know how to do X, Y, and Z? They'll be like, no. Well, okay, so maybe some help doing X, Y, and Z. Oh, I didn't even think of that. The more problems you can help them find, the more valuable you become in their eyes. The more problems you can help them find, the more valuable you become in their eyes. So, with regard to their pillars and what they need, help them understand that they need more than they maybe even considered. This is a great place to do that. Phase five would be the goal phase, their ideal state. The goal here is to get a tangible goal high enough in their mind that the gap is large enough from where they are. And you want them to feel as if they already had the result and get as emotional as possible. So, you could say something like, so what's the end goal for you here? Like, what are you hoping to achieve within the business income wise? 6 months from now, a year from now, where do you want to be? They'll be like, oh, I want to be making like 500K a year. 500K a year. Okay, cool. So how far are you from that right now? They'll be like, oh, I'm like 50K a year. Okay. So, and then this is where I like to like widen the gap here. So I'll be like, okay, so I mean, if you just didn't do anything different, like how long would it take you to get to 500K? They'll be like, oh, I'll never get there. But why? Because it's just not working. So you want to, widen that gap there. And then you want to just talk about how great it would be if they achieve the result, get them emotional. So let's say you were able to get to 500K a year, I guess what's the money for? What would you do with it? They'll be like, oh, I would just reinvest. If they give you that silly response, or sometimes they do, you could say something like, well, okay, well, on your deathbed, you're probably not gonna like be really thankful that you reinvested, right? So like if you really thought about it, like what would you really do with the money? They'll be like, oh, I'll take care of family, pay for college for my kids, blah 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 blah. Okay, that's awesome. What would it do for you maybe personally? When you can pause a little bit like that, it'll subconsciously trigger them to slow down and really think. And another question I like to ask right after that sequence is like overall, like let's say you were able to achieve this XYZ result. Overall, like how different would your life be than maybe it is right now? You'd be like, oh, it'd be so different. And then this is where you're going to go into consequence. You're going to paint this ideal state, then you're going to rip it away, right? And what I like to do here is set up a pre-frame so that they don't fight me too much on like what happens if they don't achieve it. Because if any of you guys listening to this have tried this, a consequence question, they're just like, oh, I'm just gonna keep working until I get it. It's a silly response, right? So you want them to really consider not getting what they want. Um, so what I like to do is just set up a pre-frame. So I'll be like, yeah, so it's a funny thing about us human beings, like we're often more motivated by what we don't want than what we do want, right? And I can give you an example. It's like, if you fancied an ice cream and you ran after a ice cream truck, and it drove away, and you'd just be like, I'm just not getting ice cream today, right? Go back to whatever you're doing. Life goes on. But if you look at an antelope running from a lion that's trying to eat the antelope, who's going to give up in that chase first, the antelope or the lion? They'll be like, oh, the lion. But why? Well, because the lion can eat something else. Exactly, right? So what are you running from? I like to do that because it's like a backdoor into their subconscious. They're not expecting that type of question. Sometimes they'll say, I'm not really running from anything. And then sometimes I'll be like, well, I mean, if we're honest with ourselves, we're all running from something. So if you really thought about it, what are you running from? They'll be like, oh, well, I'm running from like a retirement where I can't afford anything. Then you know what they're afraid of. And then that's where you can set up your consequence question. Now you can go right into it. I just find that helps to kind of set the table. So once they give you that little hook, that little piece of meat, you can be like, so what happens if nothing changes in your business? Everything stays exactly the same for another 6 months, another year, 2, 5, 10 years, whatever. They'll be like, oh, well, I'll never get the results. Or they might fight you on it. You might have to really let them sit in that consequence of not getting what they want. And once they get there, you ask them if they're willing to settle for that. They say no. And then you ask them like, well, okay, but why now though? Like, why do something about this now? Like, why not just like put this off until later? They'll be like, oh, well, if I keep waiting, it'll never happen. Okay, gotcha. That gives them some urgency to act now. And then you could just be like, okay, so it sounds like it's time to make a change, possibly, right? They'll be like, yeah, 100%. And and at that point, I mean, you don't have to make them cry or anything. Now, people will cry on consults, but you want to just get through the meat and potatoes of the call pretty efficiently. And once you've gotten that much, that's when you can transition to your pitch, which I'll go over how to do that efficiently and I think really optimally in the next video.